Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for being here today. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a workshop on cover arts with Bo Huffman, author of Desserts and Dragons, which has to be, as I've told Bo time and time again, one of my favorite covers. I think I'm just gonna bring it back up here. It's kind of got everything, and it has this element where it really reflects the story itself. It's not like an abstract cover. It's just this is what's going on, and you're not going to understand it until you read the book, but then all the pieces start to connect, which is always really, really nice. First and foremost, when you are creating a cover, what should you look for when you're considering a cover artist? Like, how do you go about that process to get your vision out, just like verbally, frankly?
I think the biggest thing is looking at books in your genre, um, and knowing, okay, is this fantasy book fantasy what? Is it like romantasy? Is it like high fantasy? And looking at books that have the similar mood and vibe of your story, and then decide there's kind of two camps. Do you want something that's more free drawn, kind of like my book is, or do you want a graphic artist that's more structured? And so between those two, then you kind of go down the rabbit hole of like, if I want someone who's more of a hand drawn artist, then there's places like Fiverr and more artisty sites to look for. Versus if it's more like a graphic book that you want, then there's other websites for that. And you can decide if you want like a pre made one if you want. So there's based on those things that you've decided, the next thing you want to do is check out the artist's background, make sure they're look at their social media. You don't want to see their style and say, but actually, I want it to look like this book cover, which is completely different. Because it's like, well, you chose this artist because of their style, because you like their uniqueness. And so make sure you keep that in mind when you reach out to them. And then, of course, look at the reviews. I made sure that I saw the pictures of his past work, and then I went on Amazon and made sure the books existed. I was like, you just in case. And so the credibility is there, especially if it's your first time hiring an artist. There's a huge financial decision that goes into it. And I think making sure that this is a real person, it's the right fit for you is really important.
Especially with like the era of AI and everything as well when it comes to covers. Like, I don't want to kind of make any generalizations here, but there is an element of double checking if your artist is actually doing the art or this or that. And like all these play a role. Like obviously you can plead blind ignorance, but there is an element where it's like, yeah, like find the artist that reflects the art that you want rather than trying to mold an artist into the kind of art that you want. And I think that in itself is like a lesson through all of life. Like, don't try to change people to be what you want. Find the right people to be where you want to be. Um, so that's really interesting because I wanted to follow up and ask, as someone who reads a lot of books, when do you kind of start thinking about the cover?
Well, that's interesting because, yeah, sometimes people write a book based on like something they saw, or and so they have a vision based on that. I had my story first, and I didn't know how long it took, so I didn't look for a cover artist until my final edits were almost done, and
Really?
it took quite a while for it to get done, but I didn't have a timeline back then. So it was my first book coming out. I didn't have a timeline. There were no expectations. So for me, it really worked out. I would say personally, I wouldn't reach out to a cover artist until I had at least my first rough draft done.
Mhm.
Especially when we get into the cost of these, you want to make sure this is something that you really want to go forward with. Otherwise, you have this great cover, but no book to go along with it. With my second book, I had all of my finished edits done and I sent it to my editor, at which point I contacted my cover artist.
Yeah.
And now on my third book, I'm about to finish my first draft, and I already have a very clear vision of my book
Mhm.
cover. And so it's going to vary for everyone, but I would say unless there's something on paper, don't do it.
That's fair. I feel like there's an element of that where on one hand you don't want to string somebody along, but on the other hand you don't want to pay X amount of money for something that you don't know if it's going to become a finalized product yet. So then I guess stemming from that, when you start working with a cover artist, is there anything aside from just like having a rough draft or having the first draft completed that you would recommend bringing to the process, whether it's like a mood board or like genre expectations or anything of that sort?
what I did is I took pictures and sent pictures of like covers that I really liked, and I wanted to kind of have a general idea of what I wanted to see. And then the mood is really important. If it's a character, I sent the full paragraph of what that character looked like, and so he read it and made that character. And for like this book, I said I want a dragon, but if it was like a fat lazy cat, and he was like, okay. And because he had that style, that kind of more cartoony style, it worked with it. Versus if I had gone with someone a little more stricter and not as whimsical, it might not have worked out the same way. I might have had to be a little bit more detailed with my explanation of what I wanted. And but I think the biggest thing is knowing what your genre is, what people would expect to read when they open your book, and going into that is how you want to present it to your artist. But this is the genre, this is the mood, these are the characters, here's like a scene that best describes them if you want, and it's not necessarily just physical description, but like the way that they're going to carry themselves or interact with another character. If there's more than one character on the cover, those are important. And I'd rather just send more than not enough to your artist.
I agree. And I think getting into like genre specifics as well, like with you, if I think of a sci-fi novel, I have a kind of a basic idea of what a sci-fi cover looks like. If I think of a fantasy novel, it's the same. I'm not going to expect a cover that has like a sword on it to be a sci-fi novel. And I th so there are kind of those barriers, as it were, that kind of help separate, like set the boundaries between genres. Do you think that they're played out, or do you think they're very relevant, especially when it comes to like marketing the story going forwards as well?
I think there's a very fine line, especially in like the romantasy and romance genre that I've been reading more of. I'll see these covers and it looks like they're all part of a series because it's all kind of the same dark floral scripted gold swirly font with like a skull or a crown or a sword, and it's gives the mood that you want, but they look so much alike to other books that if I had them lined up, I'd say, wow, like I would just assume they're all written by the same author.
Mhm.
And there's also kind of in romance too, there's a lot of like hand drawn character art with like the couple on the front, and they just start flooding the market. And you know what you're reading, but it's also, if I saw them all lined up on a shelf, it would be a little hard to pick one. And so you have to make it so that there's still an element of mystery in your book. People are going to pick up your book and still wonder what's inside of it, but not, everything on the front cover that it tells the whole story. And so it's hard, how unique do you want to be when there's so much that's similar out there right now?
And I think kind of stemming from that, because you're talking about books and series, is there an element where like, well, obviously, if you're within a series or you're within a universe, you want to kind of stick to a specific style. Like I know you're coming out with To the Moon, which takes place in the Everdorn kind of world. You wouldn't then do, even if it's about something very different, you would still keep the same kind of style. So how do you go about kind of like keeping cohesion to your stories throughout a series versus a standalone and like you said, kind of making sure that you don't accidentally get sucked into thinking that they're all within the same plot line.
As a consumer, I
Yeah.
really appreciate a book series that has the same style and the same size. I think
Yeah.
that's a big one.
The same size, like 5 by 8 or 6 by.
Yes,
Yes,
because
yes.
when my book came out, I was like, maybe it's too thin. Maybe I'll make it small. And I was like, you can't because some people have already bought it. So now it has to be this size.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I wanted to keep the same artist, and they are different. So you could tell that they're the same by the same artist, different style. And something that I did is I made him use the same font for like my name and the back
Mhm.
cover. And so there's little elements like that even if it was different colors, different moods, you can still have elements like the font and the spine descriptions, those things on like the spine, little details that you can keep consistent. But I know writers that have kind of gone through 2 or 3 books and decided like it's either too expensive or their books are kind of dated and they've kind of scrapped it, but they've redone all of the books, which
Mhm.
can be kind of a cost barrier for some writers. And so it kind of, there's that worry of like, well, what if I start this and I don't, it doesn't keep up with trend? But I think it does. I think if you just kind of keep with the same artist or style throughout the book, and then if you want to change it, go back and redo them, you can. But as someone who collects books and loves books, especially series, I would want to keep them similar.
We've spoken with we've worked with another author in the past, Eric Kruger, who wrote a story called Holler, and that story has ended up becoming a four-part kind of within the universe thing.
Mm,
And his first three copies he did with the same cover artist, and then the fourth copy, him and like basically the cover artist was no longer working. So he had to find a new one, but he couldn't find one to match the style. So then he went back and he made the investment of changing all four stories so that they're all lined up. Because I hear you with that. Because like you want that box set to all look the same. Like you, and it's not just that. Like you'll see on my shelf here, none of those are the same size, but they're not within the same series.
I can tell. That's the thing. Is like I can tell from even far away which one to do, even though
Yeah,
they're different colors.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that plays a huge role, both like from a consumer's perspective of like we all like the aesthetics. And when you come to like, I'm not even gonna pretend, we all judge books by your covers. Like that's when you're at a bookstore, the very first thing you see on a book is the cover. The second thing you see is the blurb. So before people even decide whether or not to read the blurb, you're being attracted to the cover. So you have to stand out. And it's the same with a series. So it's one of those things. Plus, you want to give back to your readers a little bit. I wouldn't want like if this was all one series, oof.
But
So,
that's interesting that he couldn't get another artist to mimic the style because yeah, you don't want to go to an artist and say, hey, can you just copy this other guy's
mhm.
style?
Well, and he also opened my eyes to the idea of audiobooks because he's had one of his stories turned into an audiobook as an indie author. And then he says, from there, though, if you get into the sequel has to be with the same voice. You need to have that continuity for the branding and everything, which then can get into the whole like, oh, they know you need them, so prices could change, and there could be a little bit of other agendas around the corner as well.
Yeah.
So all of that is like there are things that you don't really consider until you're in the midst of it. But it's really interesting, like keeping the font the same, keeping the general style the same. I need you might need to remind me because, for example, for Desserts and Dragons, I also really liked how you had it within a frame. Does To the Moon have the same?
And that's the thing is it looks almost I was like, I don't know. There isn't and it's dark. It's like a darker story
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
because it's nighttime and it's winter and it's a different season.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so I it looks a little strange to me because it's not framed, but the mirrors are such a it's supposed to look like a mirror in the first book and it's such a
I was gonna say
pressing element in the
the
first one.
frame plays a key role in the story, so it makes sense. So like you wouldn't want it to then become the stylistic element if it was a plot point in one book that doesn't carry forward into other books. It's
Yeah.
that continuity issue as well.
It was also, just deciding the title. I was like, oh, should I keep this and that? And then I
Mm.
was like, that was a huge thing that I had to think about because it is a series, but it's a standalone series. And then, and that changes too. That what your book title is, the way that the words are going to look on the title are going to be different too. So those are all things that play into the design of your cover.
And it's even like Desserts and Dragons, for example, is like more letters than To the Moon. So then it's a question of do you want it on one line? Do you want it on two lines, three lines? There's a lot of factors that come in here, especially if you're expanding within a universe, not necessarily sequels. I sure plays a role as well because it's not. I haven't read it. Forgive me.
It's not out yet.
It's not
You're
out yet.
forgiven.
But To the Moon takes place in the same world, but I assume it's not like this is what happens the next day, picks up from there.
Right. It's same universe. It's standalone. It's a different cast of characters.
Yeah.
There's some background characters that kind of come in and out of the books. But for all intents and purposes, you can just pick it up by itself and read it. But that is the nice thing about having an artist who is as creative as you are, who hand draws them, and it's like, well, what do you want? And I was like, well, I don't know, kind of. And for this one, I was like, just kind of, I like your style. This is the setting. This is the mood. This is the character.
Mhm.
Make him fly towards the moon. And I thought he did a great job with color. Like I love the different colors that he did because it's so hard to be like, I want a full moon in a night sky. Like that's so dark. But how do
Right.
you keep it kind of lighthearted at the same time? And that's another reason to invest in a really good artist.
Well, and I think that's what it comes down to when you're indie self-published versus traditionally published is cover art is an investment. And I wanted to ask, you don't have to give me a specific number for you personally, but when it comes to making a cover, what is the actual like what's a typical timeline for like once you start reaching out to the author and by the time you have a product you tend to be happier with? And if you want to get it professionally designed, like what does that cost kind of range between?
I would say a cover, whether it's graphic design or cover artist, I would say starting at $150 easily.
Okay.
Anything less than that, you're kind of taking a gamble that, well, why is it cheaper? Is it because they're like inexperienced and they want more clients? And
Mhm.
in that case, they're giving you a discount because, they don't have as much experience. But I think kind of the price you need to start with is $150. And then upwards of 500 plus dollars. My first cover was around $500.
Okay.
Um, and it was a crazy amount of money, it's crazy because you tell them your idea and then you wait,
Yeah.
and then they come back with it, and you're like, I hope it's going to be good. Like you don't know because they haven't drawn something like your book before,
Mhm.
and so I didn't know what I was doing, so I reached out to him pretty early on. So I found him on Fiverr, and I just searched fantasy cover artist, and I looked through so many pages, and I found it, and I loved it. And there's tons of really good reviews, recent reviews, also
Yeah,
important. And so
important.
I was like, okay, well, let me see if this is something he'd be into. And I kind of pitched my book and this genre and the summary of it and what I wanted. And he was booked out. I contacted him in July, and he was available in October.
Really? So I guess
So
that's another part of like maybe don't wait to the very end to reach out to cover artists because you don't know about timelines as well.
right, if you're on a timeline, then that's not as good.
Mhm.
Especially if, so now I'm kind of on the 6 to 8 month book track. So it's like, okay, keeping that in mind, is he available? This and that.
Mhm.
And then the next book that I had, I reached out to him in January. He was available in March, so about 2 months.
Okay.
And then the rough sketch, takes him about a week or two.
Mhm.
And then once you approve it, you say, yes, this is what I want. And then about another month before it's all cleaned up and everything looks good. So it was done in early April. So I would say from reaching out to them, and again, assuming they're even taking new clients,
Yeah.
3 months is what I would give it.
Dang. Yeah, you don't really consider any of that. The idea of like finding a freelancer and then saying, "Oh, I would love to work on this, but I'm free in 3 months." And then being like, "Do I want to wait the 3 months or do I want to find someone else? Is it going to be worth the wait? This and that." There's a
And now
lot of
I've
things
used
to
him for two
consider.
books, so now I have to use him.
Well, that's the other thing is that it's the same with the audiobooks. You want to stay consistent going forwards, but you're a returning client, which I assume makes the process a lot smoother as well. I would
He
hope.
does. It's nice because he knows the style. I was like, oh, can you just make it the same font as before? And it took, a quick change. So that is nice. So he has kind of an idea of like, this is what your previous book was like. It's in the same world. I kind of know what to go with. So that is very nice. I know his communication style.
Mhm.
Um, he's very clear, but he's in a different time zone than me. So it's like
Yeah.
another thing that I had to remember. Of like, like keeping in mind, like he's not going to get this message until the next day. I don't know what else he's doing. So just keep that in mind. But that's the thing is like, how soon do you get a cover artist? Like before your book is written? Okay, well, like what if it changes
Yeah.
from first draft to last draft, and then the only thing he changed once I said yes, this is it, money's transferred, is final size of the book. Because
Yeah.
in the last few edits, we might cut like a scene or something or add some more and fluff it up, and then he resized it. But that's really the only difference they're going to do. And they are perfectly within their rights to charge more if they
Yeah,
want.
and that comes down to spines are always complicated because at least like uh
Yeah.
when we print the stories, it really comes down to like yeah, the paper thickness. And the paper thickness, depending on where it's printed, is going to be different, which means that the spine is going to stretch or shrink. And it's hard to get it. I think we actually did really well with Desserts and Dragons, where it's like it's right on the There's
Oh, he knows
no
what he's doing.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to like going through this process, what are kind of, because especially now that Desserts and Dragons is starting to pick up steam and you're becoming a bigger player in the community, as it were, what are things that you're seeing people do in terms of like mistakes you're seeing people make?
I think the biggest mistake is I can do it myself.
Yeah.
If you're good at it, sure. I mean, we talked about kind of graphic artists. If you have Canva and you're really good at it, then like, yeah, you can probably definitely get something. I've seen books like thriller books that are like a single picture with some font and they're like bestsellers. So like, it's really, it's kind of what's in your genre, what's doable, what do you want, your audience to have. And I think another one we kind of touched on AI. I'm in a couple like book cover groups, and the number of times I've had people post their cover and ask, "Does this look AI to you?" is shocking. And not only is it like I don't want to be, cheated out of something that I paid good money for, but it's also, without getting too much into it, but if the cover looks fake, even if it was written, was handmade, then like people are going to assume the inside is AI, and so there's this almost fear now of like what style do I want my cover so it doesn't look like it's made by AI, but it's like a really well done cover, so it does look AI. Like, that's almost a catch 22 almost that you're kind of trying to figure out with, and
Well, and
that's
it's
a big one too.
it's something that we struggle with at YPQ as well, just because like we'll get a submission and we'll go through and we look up the cover art online and we gotta like go under it with a magnifying glass, being like, do they have five fingers? Is this kind of does this all make sense? Because yeah, like I'm sure like sometimes they slip past, we sometimes AI is done a lot better than other times, but just for those of you watching, don't get an AI cover. The whole thing with indie and self-publishing and all that is that you're supporting the little guy through and through. At the end of the day, it is an investment. But if you believe in the story that you've written, which I really hope you do, invest in yourself. Like, even
Even
if
if
you're
it means
spending
putting your book
200.
out later.
Mhm. This one, for example, nothing ever happens on Main Street. The pairing. Darren, the author made this on Canva. So like, if you really honestly, it turned out really well for something made
Yeah,
on
you did. You
Canva.
did a great job.
I'm very happy with it.
You can
But
totally do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if it's a financial constraint, then I would really reconsider using AI because AI more often than not is just going to alienate your audience. Take a course online, watch YouTube, figure it out. But you can find, like you said, it's $150 and then it can scale lower if you really need to. But
For pre-made cover, yeah.
exactly. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of options out there, and AI is like the easy way out, as it were. Don't do that.
Yeah, that's the thing is another thing, without getting too far over the marketing thing, people are like, oh, my book's not selling. Is it the cover? And it's like, well, how much marketing have you done? Well, nothing. I'm just trying to promote it for free on TikTok. And it's like, well, yeah, like if you don't put money into the product and investing in it, then like how can you expect people to dish out, $10, $15 for it? At the end of the day, it's something that people want to consume and hold and have, and it's a treasure, and you should treat it as such.
And like, if there's a book you really like, if the cover is bleak, like it's gonna be hard to, hey guys, look at this, look at this, look at this. Like come read it. You have to convince your friends to read it. And like I don't want to convince people to read a book. I want everything to stand for itself. You can very much tell which stories have invested in a good cover and which ones haven't. Because if you line them all up on the table at what do you call it, Barnes and Nobles or Waterstones or something, some of those books stand out more than others. And nine times out of ten, it's because those are the books that had more money invested in the cover art. So it sucks to say that like the reality is we do judge books by their covers, but if you look at the actual process when you buy a book, the very first thing you see is the cover. So that's your first impression. And that's your first impression with your whole story. And, you want the quality of the cover to reflect that and to reflect the rest of the story. But on that note, that's all the questions I have. So thank you so much again for joining us, Bo. If you've somehow missed it, again, it's Desserts and Dragons, the coziest cover of all time. And stay tuned. There'll be more workshops in the future.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.